Now with that out the way, let's carry on here. For the Reflex S, I would remove the control rings from the front at this stage. I think we can probably get away with this and remove them later. We've got 4 screws hold the front in place, and under the 4 screws there should be 12 dished washers. That one does not want to come out. There we go. It's away now. The heads of these are a bit crusty with adhesive. Alright, and now let's have the front off. Okay. Here's a couple of the washers from here. So here's our shutter assembly. That's going to have to be stripped and cleaned. All this filth's got to come off the front housing, of course, prior to putting everything back together. We'll recover our 12 washers, which do appear to be present and correct. That's not always the case. Cameras have been worked on previously, things get lost, and getting the washers back in place is no trivial matter. And so sometimes you'll find cameras where they didn't go back for one reason or another. I'll just latch down the capping plate and the mirror so they're out of my way. There's the front cam that carries the action through to the shutter. Here's the main cam that operates the capping plate and mirror. And the body itself, right, so here I'm going to strip out the meter cord first. There's a screw here that stops the cord from being able to fall off the pulleys easily. Obviously we've got a single screw at the top here. And unhook that spring, take the tension off the cord, lift off the drum, and I can unspool that cord. Generally speaking, the cords, unless they show damage, they're good to be reused. I can't get those knots up past those rollers, but if I slacken these 2 screws up and swing the rollers back out the way, I probably can. There's one, here's the other. So there's my cord still fitted to the main drum at the top of the camera. I'll put that to one side. There's the drum from the base of the camera, and I'll just tighten those screws back up. We can carry on stripping down the rest of the body. There's our cocking rack. Yeah, what's this? Something hard. I don't know what that is exactly. It might be rubber or something, that's a rubber band that's hardened up. What it would be doing in here yet, I haven't figured out. How it got in there, that would be a mystery too. But that shouldn't be in there. Foreign bodies, that is. We don't have that. To the film advance. This screw at the top of the camera, that's locked in with a bit of lacquer. We have that out. The gear. Now under here it starts getting interesting. I shouldn't be prying with my tweezers, I've just cleaned them up. Right, so we've got that plate to start with. Here we have a tiny little spring which operates this little pull. That little spring there, I'll put that carefully to one side, I don't want to lose that. Another screwdriver. Let's have this gear off here. This is somewhat different to the mechanism in a 3C. Does the same job, just does it in a different way. Two screws hold this in place. That screw's loose. That's not particularly good. Its mate here is not loose. So that would be doing duty for both. I'll recover that spring. That spring operates this little pull here which stops the film advance from being able to back up. Need that rewind button off next. I need special pliers for that. Oh, that's pretty stiff. Normally you've only got to just break the thing loose and then you can undo it with your fingers, but not today. Well, the button's a bit dirty looking. Put its spring there. I've got to put its spring to one side so it doesn't get lost. There's a small screw here which drives the sprocket from the sprocket shaft. To remove that. Lift out the sprocket shaft. It should allow the top bush here to come out. And the clutch assembly. The clutch assembly provides us our controlled slippage between the take-up spool and the sprocket. Unhook the spring from the base of the back rewind button catch to take the tension off that so that it doesn't want to ping across the room when I remove the screw. Let's gather that spring up, have that lever out. 3 screws hold this in place. That's our film advance shaft. That was still under tension. It's not uncommon for these screws to be loose. Okay, that looks good. I'll hold back this lever. Should be able to press that shaft out. And there's our film advance shaft. I'll recover the 3 wash. This is the grease in here is completely packed and dried and sticky. That would have been contributing to the stiffness that I'd noted with the film advance. Here's our take-up spool. Now, the top of that is covered in dirty grease. Here's the sprocket. And the body of the camera is stripped down pretty much as far as you normally need to take things. I'll clean this all up and I'll check carefully the action of these levers to make sure that they move freely without any hesitation or stickiness. If they don't, if they're not they don't work well, I'll have to remove all this, and I just like removing a lot. Now here, see all that red paint? Someone's attempted to lock this screw, which you'd use to adjust the point at which the film advance releases to allow you to wind on to the next shot. You need that action to happen at the same time that the shutter releases. Someone's adjusted this and they've attempted to lock the screw to stop it from coming loose with some red paint, but they have painted all over the spring so that the action there would not be as smooth as it should be, so the release would have been somewhat stiffer than it should be. I'm going to remove that. I don't normally remove this. You can see there's a little cover plate missing off here. We haven't got it. Someone had taken it off during an earlier service. They didn't put it back. Normally you can leave this in the camera. Today we can't because I want that filth off there. All that lacquer and rubbish I want off there. There's the return spring, and there's all the rest of that red paint. And it's just all stuck together with that paint. Okay, well that was an unexpected bonus, wasn't it? The leatherette on the back of the camera, there's a couple of little ice bumps right there and there, but after my adventures with the leatherette on the front, I'm not enthusiastic to jump in and do anything about that. Here, once upon a time there was a little pad here and here, so that when the mirror flicked up it didn't whack things completely. I wonder whether those lumps I got out of the camera, these rubbery looking lumps here, was something to do with that. I'll just recover a couple from another parts camera and put that here in place. Let me have a look at the back of the shutter. That pad at least is in place, and this has been serviced before. Okay, so far so good. Right, I've got some acetone here. I'm going to use it to hopefully get rid of that paint or lacquer or whatever is being used to lock this together. Virtually none of it was in the right place to do whatever it was designed to do. It's just been painted on with a broom by the looks of it. This was so far down the shaft it probably would have made the action somewhat stiff. And likewise I've got to do this screw. I must say that when you need to adjust this release mechanism so that the film advance is released at the same point your shutter fires, it's awkward. You can only do it without the meter being present in the camera because the access hole is underneath the meter. So that means that basically you have to assemble the camera without the meter, test it, make your adjustments, disassemble the camera and put the meter back in place. I think I've got enough of that out of the threads. That should be okay. See if I can get some it off the spring. It's a wonder this wasn't sticking. It's a wonder the shutter release wasn't sticking down with all this lacquer gluing things together. You could get away with it if the part of it was lubricated before you did this. The spring should have been lubricated. It should never have had any of this getting on it. When you do need to lock a screw like that, the best way to do it is you take a toothpick and you get a tiny drop of the lacquer on the tip of the toothpick, and then you hold the spring down with one hand and use the toothpick to put the lacquer in exactly the right spot on here, which would be right at that point. That's so stiff because of all the lacquer that, to tell the truth, that's not going to need any lacquer because it's not going to fall apart. That'll hold its setting without any problems at all. So that was just a little bit of clumsiness on someone's part. The retina reflexes were never beloved by repairers. They require so much extra work, and there's so many things that, minor things, that if they're not right, you end up having to strip down the entire camera and to get at things. And so people were often pressed for time. They didn't love the camera. They'd take any shortcut they could sometimes in order to get out and go home. I'll see if I can lift that mirror out and put it safely to one side. It looks like it will come. Sometimes they've got a drop of adhesive underneath them and they do not want to part company with the tray, in which case don't force them because mirrors in two pieces are not much good. Just going to put a couple of toothpicks under there to lift the mirror above the front lip so that I can manoeuvre it forward in the tray. It's coming. Let's get another toothpick. Now I can take that mirror off and put it somewhere safe, because it's surface silvered, and surface silvered mirrors are exceptionally delicate. They do not like fingerprints, and getting marks off them, if you put a greasy fingerprint on them, that gets exciting, getting it off without doing damage. Okay, so I think that at this stage I'm ready to start cleaning this body casting up. Okay, well, I'm going to start scraping some of this rubbish off here. Now mostly this is dry and crusty, and scraping it with the back edge of the scalpel, not the sharp front edge, just scrapes this rubbish right off. And if you can achieve that, it's much better than having to work at it with solvents. This bright patch here is where I was working away with the scalpel trying to get under that leatherette where it was so well stuck right at that point. Why you get localised patches where the adhesive is stuck really well, causing you problems, where all the rest of it's falling off, I don't know. That's one of life's mysteries. This process is another reason I wanted that mirror out of the way. I don't want it getting all covered in the dusty filth, which may or may not clean off easily. So we know the camera's been serviced before. It's anyone's guess what adhesives were used. Or how they interacted. It's very likely, judging by the lumpiness of it, that the surfaces were not cleaned before the leatherettes were put back. Simply another layer of adhesive was put in place, and that was it. Okay, so let's put that to one side. I've got to clean this mess up. This is terrible. Now I'm just using some naphtha to clean the body. Removing any old grease from around here. It's dried out, probably gathered up dust and dirt. The base of the camera, you can see that grease is just thick and black, particularly unpleasant looking. Mechanical parts at the moment are all away in the ultrasonic cleaner, getting their first wash with not naphtha, it's wax and grease remover, which will soften up and get rid of the vast majority of that old dried grease. And then after that they'll be cleaned in a hot water and a domestic detergent, an ammonia based detergent, which will get rid of all the residual grease and rubbish. And after they've been rinsed and dried, they should look like shiny new parts. Probably prettier than they were even when they were first made. And the reason you have to do things like that with cameras of this age is simply that when you are servicing them, you are not repairing them in the way that you would do with a camera that was otherwise fairly current. You are not chasing a particular fault from a particular failure of one component or sub-assembly. You are faced with multiple problems all stemming from much the same thing, which is usually dried out grease and accumulated dust and grit and dirt and sometimes corrosion. You're never ever going in to fix one problem, you're always going in to fix multiple problems. Some of which may be the headline problem that brought the camera to your attention. But very often with the most serious issues were the ones that were never spoken of. No one was aware of them. Any discoloration you see on the aluminium body casting is probably corrosion of one form or another. This is a pretty good example and it's cleaning up very well. They don't always clean up as well as this. And of course it's only on the inside. It doesn't affect the function, the appearance of these parts doesn't affect the function typically. Discoloration like this, you know, it's hidden under multiple components and the pretty leatherette covers it up, so it's not causing a problem. But sometimes it can be the indication that there will be problems elsewhere. Okay, at this stage, there's a spring here. Let's just get that mirror clipped up out. There's a spring here which is easily lost, so I'm going to remove it from the camera now. So that I've still got it, because otherwise it'll be gone and I'll be saying rude words and looking all around the room for it and going through my spare parts looking for a suitable replacement. Right, that's probably enough to be going on with now. I'm just going to go away and get some fire up the compressor and blow this out to get rid of all the dust and rubbish. Well, that dust is all gone. I'm going to wipe out the inside of the camera. Now at the base here, that's where all the film chips and so forth will accumulate, and that's all grease that is come from the film advance mechanism. Of course it doesn't need to be greasy down there, that just shows you that the original grease has migrated, and the original grease may have been a little bit excessive. That's where you'll find the film chips if people have been routinely stripping the film at the end. You get it when you haven't set the frame counter correctly when you've loaded the film, or if you're trying to squeeze an extra exposure out of a film. Otherwise the film advance lock will stop you from being able to do that. Now the capping plate here's got a bit of a mark on it, a greasy looking mark there. I want to see if that'll go away. It doesn't look like it's going to. You can see a bright mark across there at this point. Of course, capping plates are prone to damage when people are loading the film. If they've got the back of the camera open and they stick their big fat thumb on there, they can press on that. Sometimes you'll get a subtle fault. Sometimes they'll press on it and it'll distort the catch that's holding it closed, so that it's got a bit of a rattle to it, and that little rattle means that light can reflect back up underneath the bottom edge of it, and you end up with problems with your exposures. You end up with like a light leak where you wouldn't expect to see one. Might show on some exposures and not others. It would show at the top of the picture, which of course is up in the sky in most cases, so you may not pick it that there's a light band right along the top. Well, with the body cleaned, I've got to clean off this base plate. So I've just sprayed this with some solvent. And I'm working this with a toothpick to get this rubbish off. This will be adhesive of the various sorts. And some minor fragment of the leatherette itself, probably, the fibres from the back of that. And as you can see, it was quite thick, the adhesive. And ideally I want this all off. There's no chance of getting leatherettes to sit nice and smooth and flush on the camera if they're sitting on a lumpy mess like this. So I'm just going to have to work at this, and it may be that acetone's the right thing to attack this with. As you can imagine, if that gunk got into the works, it would effectively glue things up. Nothing would be going anywhere. So I don't want it getting under that button, for example, for the frame counter. Alright, there's no point in you watching me fight with this filth.